Hey there, I've got two kinds of paint, three major differences, and hundreds of canvases painted. So this lesson is all about the biggest differences between watercolors and acrylics, things that I've learned from using both of these mediums. So thanks for watching the Painting Your World show. I'm Heather Freeman, the founder of the Painted Playground, and this show is for you, the creative who has an inner calling, a voice, a desire that is wanting to be expressed. So each week we'll take an in-the-studio look at painting techniques and processes for getting what you have inside of you out onto the canvas. Thanks for spending some time with me today, and let's get started. So I've got my pad of watercolor paints, and I've got a few of my acrylic paints pulled out, and I want to show you, some of the major differences. So the first one, what we're going to talk about are how they're made, where to use them, and their transparency differences. So how they're made, watercolors are made by mixing pigments or dyes with gum arabic. So it's a tree sap from a tree in Africa, and that's how you get your watercolor paints. Acrylic paints, on the other hand, they're thick, and they are also used by mixing a pigment or a dye, but it's with a polymer. So polymer is like a plastic or resin. So those are the major differences in how they're made. Watercolors, where you can use them. Watercolors can really only be used on paper. So, and it needs to be a special, it doesn't need to be. Of course, you can play on copy paper if that is what you have. But generally speaking, watercolors are for paper, and there are special papers to use watercolors with. Let's see, this, what I'm using today is a mixed media canvas. Canson mixed media, it's probably my favorite go-to mixed media pad. And yeah, so watercolors are really for paper. Acrylics, on the other hand, you can really use them on a ton of different surfaces. You can use them on glass, you can use it on wood, of course you can use it on paper, plastic, you can use it on fabric, and you can even use it on ceramics. So tons of different places where you can use acrylic paints. So a lot more options for places that you can use acrylic paints, for sure. And then the other big difference is transparency. So let me just pull out, let me flip this over. Let me just flip this over. And I just want to show you the difference in transparency between watercolors and acrylics. So as I lay this down, you can see you're really using the white of the paper and the transparency of the paint, and you're playing with that. Mix. Okay, and then let me show you, let me put down some of my acrylic paint, and this goes on much thicker. Of course I can, if I wanted to, I can add some water to this. This is the fun thing about acrylics, is that you can play with the thickness and the transparency. So if I wanted to make my acrylic paint look a lot more like a watercolor, I do have that option. So you can see here, the more water I add, the more transparency I get, and it looks very similar to the watercolor that I just laid down. Okay. So, due to the way that they are applied, acrylic paints can be used either, in their more, when more color concentrated and thicker and lay color upon color, or it can be used as a watercolor. So it's pretty fun to play around with that and see the options that you have. So there are differences. These are three major differences between watercolors and acrylics. Acrylics is my go-to because it just lends itself to more options in terms of being able to play more. Watercolors definitely takes a little bit more skill, a little bit more patience, I would say, in learning how to really use the transparency of the paint to make your design. So acrylics tend to be a lot more forgivable. You can make mistakes and paint over it and go from there. Whereas with watercolors, once that color is laid down, it's there, and you can either figure out how to work around it or start from scratch. So acrylics are definitely my go-to. They're just a lot easier to play with and have some fun with. So I hope that helps you kind of see the difference between watercolors and acrylics. There's differences both between how they're made, where they can be used, and their transparency. Those are the three major differences that I found when starting out painting and painting with acrylics. Is kind of how I ended up there, is just the ease of being able to use acrylics, the flexibility, and the opportunity to really play and not worry so much about mistakes and not care so much about mistakes. So those were three big differences that have stood out for me when choosing between watercolors and acrylics. All right, thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time at the canvas. Bye for now.